all. And oh, it looks like I am the only one here, which is, and there is Shabaka, Dr. Fergus, and Kwame Kamau. Hello and good evening, gentlemen. I am
A
hoping
very
that.
pleasant good night to you as well. So very happy to be here. Very pleasant good night to all of our loyal listeners via Talk City 91.1 FM. Welcome to Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, a place to find consensus, certainly the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. Tonight we are going to have a very dynamic program. I'm, of course, joined by the veterans of Indaba. I'm the neophyte, I'm the rookie, I'm the new kid on the block, so to speak. But favorably, we have here some Indaba stalwarts in the persons of Dr. Claudius Fergus, historian and lecturer par excellence, and definitely a Pan Africanist extraordinaire. And then every Batman needs a Robin. And in this case, we have the most excellent communications specialist, definitely an activist extraordinaire. He needs no introduction to the Indaba audience. Our beloved brother, certainly my big brother, and hearing that, I know he's smiling with me, big brother, Shabaka Kambon. Tonight, we have quite a packed program ahead. We are going to be talking about the Asante Hene. Who is this figure? What does it mean to us as a diaspora? What is the significance of this king of Africa, this king of the Ashanti, coming to visit our shores? An official state visit, nonetheless. We'll be talking about that in tonight's Africa Report. But before we do, we want to do a feature on a very controversial issue that we touched on about 2 weeks ago that has to do with hair discrimination. And to lead us out in that conversation, because I and I, Rastafari, no deal with conversation business, we will have Shabaka Kambon lead us out in that discourse. But there's so much to talk about because apart from the incident itself that happened at Trinity Mocha, there is, of course, the ministry here code that came out of it. And then the ministry here code has had some, let's call them mixed responses from the denominational groups. Some of them we anticipate why they act and behave like that. Others are quite surprising. But again, a very dynamic program. Without any further ado, over to you, Shabaka.
Thank you for that short but beautiful introduction, Reverend Kwame. Let me start off tonight by sending our condolences to the family, friends, former students of Dr. Professor Emeritus Brinsley Samaru. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that Professor Samaru was one of the intellectual. He's part of a member of the Black Power generation, one of the academics or the academicians, the intellectuals of the Black Power generation. That is those people born in the 1940s generally who came to consciousness around the time of independence and who wanted more from for us at that time than the powers that be were willing to give, more than a flag and an anthem. They wanted to give real form and substance to independence. And that generation, of course, existed all across the Caribbean. And we must recognize those who stood out among that generation. And in the case of Professor Samaru, many of our listeners perhaps will not be aware of this, but this Indian professor, he was approached by the young revolutionaries, those who were in the leadership of the Black Power movement in 69 and 70. They went to his classroom and they asked him to leave the ivory tower at the University of West Indies and to join them in neighborhoods in Freetown, Belmont, in Laventille, and so on, to engage in education, the education of the masses of the people. That was part of the program of 1970. And along with Ken Parmesan and Professor Sweet, they became and even I think perhaps Doctor what's his name uh, Lloyd Best, I think, may have done one or two sessions as well. But they became that group. Brinsley was core to that traveling group of lecturers that went into bars and on the blocks and in community centers, to bring the liberation information that at that time was absent from the curricula for primary and secondary schools. Today, not enough has changed, but certainly there has been some progress in those curricula. So we honor Dr. Brinsley Samaru's contribution going back to 1970 as part of that Black Power generation. And also, when we started this work on decolonization in the Caribbean Freedom Project back in 2017, he was one of the early voices that supported the decolonization of public spaces that we drew the society's attention to. And last year in September, when we launched the auspicious the committee the civil society committee, what we call the shadow committee, to develop a report on the people and values that we honor in our public spaces across the Trinidad and Tobago. He was one of those academicians who signed up to work for free on that civil society committee to guide us, to share information, and so on. For that report, which will be out a little later in the year. And so, and in that meeting, we got a chance to get a sense of his true commitment to the independence of this country, to bring in real, genuine independence. That spirit and that idealism that he would have possessed back in the 60s and 70s was still there with him right up until the end. And so we want to acknowledge that contribution, to celebrate that contribution here on Indaba, and to send our condolences to his friends and family. And of course, we're going to follow up these statements here with a proper, commentary in press on the matter. So once again, our condolences to the friends and family of Professor Samaru. And now we have with us, joining us, a very special guest, a man whose voice is probably not heard enough in this country, somebody who I consider to be a genuine, organic philosopher and an artist, of many different dimensions, a very multi-dimensional artist, to talk to us about something that we might have all been sort of skipping over when we think about the hair issue. Because this is an issue that we have dealt with for decades, and we were pushing and writing and looking at legal measures and so on. And then something happens that gets the attention of those in authority, and it's a picture, and they say a picture tells 1,000 words. Vic, I want you to help our audience to understand the power of art. And that picture of those Trinity boys standing outside of that cathedral, facing, or the church, facing that church wall with their hair in all those African hairstyles. And how that a piece of art like that could change the world.
Hi, Trinidad and Tobago. Hi, Indaba audiences all over the diaspora. And hi, co hosts. Yeah, I mean, that picture can easily join the ranks of the great pictures of, in terms of African struggle and resistance, in the 500 plus years of the encounter with the West. I mean, it somehow, I don't know who took the picture. I don't know how it was staged. I don't know whatever, but encapsulated the amount of information symbolically encapsulated in that picture of all these boys, heads and backs turned to the camera, where the signifying thing was the hairstyles, and their faces turned towards the blank walls of the church, and they all in the uh, the kind of school uniform type, you know, wear, and that kind of stuff, that kind of uniform kind of thing. I mean, that there's so many codes and stuff shooting off in that image, that image encapsulated the entire struggle that has been going on, and that debate, um, probably since we arrived here. Um, in on it, this for the second time, under deleterious circumstances, where
Imperialism.
yeah, under white supremacy and under chattel slavery and that kind of stuff, where every signifier of identity needed to be destroyed, where the aim of the plantation was the destruction of the oldest civilized people on planet Earth. That was the experiment of the plantation. It's 300 years, um, a white supremacist experiment of how do you remove identity from the oldest civilized human beings on the planet, and how do you deracinate, de-ethnicize, these people to make them more malleable, to make them slaves. Um, and so the picture kind of encapsulated all that energies, like all that ancient stuff, as well as the man, look at it, you know, and as the window and the columns and the stone wall, the uniformity of the stuff, and then all these young boys, and their ethnic hair, their African hair, all turned away facing the cold and feeling stone, you know. Um, and it said so much, all the facelessness of black male identity in the current mainstream. The fact that we're not, um, black male identity now is all a series of codes. It's been reduced to a series of codes, and all stereotypical codes, and all reduced. The complexity and the heroism and the three dimensionality and the 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 dimensionality of the African
Let me
persons.
ask you a
You
question,
know,
brother. These young men, will we look back on them in time to come as heroes? Will we look back on the artist who took the picture, who staged it and took that picture as a hero? Will we? How will we see this in time to come?
I mean, again, I don't know these conditions on which the picture was taken or anything. Sometimes, these things happen surely by
By
spiritual
accident.
accident. The thing is, though, it did its duty. It summed up, like 20 something years of hard active struggle, on this matter, you know, um, in one image, and propelled my dogs. I have a number
Yeah,
of
we want
dogs.
to welcome your dogs in, Dava. Yes.
Say hello, Alpha. All right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. They hear me talk to invisible person, so
The,
they'll
the,
come
the
to.
reaction the reaction on social media was quite incredible. It went viral. There was
Yeah, I
people.
mean,
It sort
without
of
that
summoned
image,
a kind of rage
yeah,
in people. They understood
yeah.
immediately. And you say without that
Without
image.
that image, we were gonna have the same discussions. We were gonna have all that we always have, and it would have gone peaked and valleyed in the same way that it normally does, and it would have, it
And we'd
might
be
have
waiting for the
inched,
next incident.
yeah, it would have inched
Yeah.
along and that kind of stuff. But the image did the thing, and it's all about the power of art, the power of image, and the power of things to change things. on that topic of power of art, to answer the question that you just gave me about what will the future be for the boys and all those kinds of things. My thing is bouncing off the power of the image is that we live in an age where black art, especially black music, has been weaponized against against black people, right? Where the icon in mainstream black music and black art is the gangster, right? And the gangster, um, which those cornrowed haired boys, that's what they're typed as. When they see themselves in, in most mainstream stuff, that's what they're gonna see. They're criminalized and all of those things. The icon of the gangster is the single most dangerous prospect facing African futures right now. It is something that is claiming entire generations and entire communities all across the mainland and the diaspora. Um, it it, in the 60s when white supremacy was being battled against on all fronts: Native American resistance, African resistance, independence movements, civil rights movements, feminist movements, all kinds of different things coming at them at all quarters and stuff. And they had to give, they had to give ground. Um, in the at the end of the 60s, and those things, some of those things culminated a century of struggle and those kinds of things, trade union movement struggles, all those different kinds of things, and then massive reforms all across the white supremacist West. But then the 70s came, and the 70s was the period of backlash, the assassination of leaders, and all of those things. One of the things that they pioneered in that period was they realized that the cultural industry was one of the main revolutionary tools, and the cultural forms were one of the main revolutionary tools. So it's especially for the white youths, like white music and the music and record industry and those kinds of things. And they seized control of all of those companies and those kinds of things. And they neutered revolutionary music, so they came in disco, and they used the drugs that the
Vic,
indigenous.
Vic,
No,
I you know,
I'll have to say that. I know we have other things,
yeah,
but they use the drugs to neuter the revolution, and then they discovered in going after their white youths, how to neuter their white youths, that they figured out how to neuter the music, and then with black exploitation, they figured out how to neuter black media and to sell uh, negative, corrupt icons to black people. So the revolutionary.
yeah, I think the point is well taken. We have music that it does not promote the kind of values, and you're saying that there's a deliberate hand in that, and of course there's research to support that. But for
So I'm
tonight's
saying that
program,
those boys and black males and black boys, especially ethnicized black boys with this is fur.
there you go. Now you
This
use it
is,
up.
um, those boys are going to face a whole series of weapons bared against them. Apart from the weapons of entry and access, which the things like their hair and all those other kind of things are gonna um, have the societies loaded against them. So boys like that are not supposed to be in boardrooms. They're not supposed to be in labs. They're
Yeah,
not supposed to have
you're right.
access.
And what I would say is that I'm glad to see that our young men are defying those rules. There's a gentleman by the name of Dennis Malik Barnes who just won a record amount of scholarships coming out of New Orleans, an African American brother, over $10 million, a record in scholarships. He
Yeah,
has
there've been a
He
number
looks
of
like
them
any one of those
recently.
boys. There's
A number
Deontay
of
Taylor from Howard University, any one of those boys. So we defy those odds. Now let's come around. We have about 5 minutes left. Let me bring in my colleagues here. There has been coming out of the photograph. There was a national response, a kind of a guttural response, which pushed the hands of those in authority. What I've observed about the discourse, though, is that it now seems to exclude race. It seems to a lot of it now seems to be about discipline and about long hair and short hair, without any mention of race in the conversation. Dr. Fergus, Brother Reverend Kamau, I want you all to come in on this subject matter.
I'll give
Okay,
you the Dr.
just briefly for me. Yeah, just briefly. I'll speak to the photograph since Ruben Davies started on that. I was impressed as well with the artistry that it captured history, it captured the moment, it captured, a subaltern kind of revolutionary question. Where is the door? There's a window. I'm not seeing a door. And the impact that it made on me was, hey, this is not a lockout. This is excommunication. You're excommunicated from the system as such. That's the message that it got. Also, that this revolution in here is ending at the church where it started, because it is the missionaries that started, propagating the demonization of African hair and couching it in terms of decency and neatness and discipline and all that, and here it was ending at least a major chapter of it, because the minister's statement with respect to hair code is that moment in time. It's the end of a chapter. It's not the end of the struggle, but it's the end of a chapter. So it's a new chapter being written now. But yeah, and I'm saying this is an appropriate place to have, entrench that moment in history and to record it in the newspapers where it could be accessed, by future researchers. So since we are very close to the lotto, I'll give way to my brother Kwame.
Yes, Kwame. Is this really a conversation about discipline and neatness, or is this really a conversation about race?
Well, absolutely coming on the back end, of course, of the Lotto break and hopefully another powerful Africa report. We'll have more time, certainly, to sink our teeth into it. Tonight we had two very special guests, Phil and I think Alpha. So we were able to sink our teeth into the meat of the matter, further to those breaks. But what I can say on the onset, just very, very briefly, is the fact that there were some 23 boys that were excluded, I'm told, by way of the Guardian newspaper. And very interestingly enough, as a cleric, I want to bring that element in. 23 is a number that represents creativity, freedom, change. It is a number that is associated with harmony, with wealth, with protection and abundance. And as it were, it also represents and inspires what we would call the breaking down of obstacles and barriers. So it seems to me that on a universal level, there were all kinds of ancestors and divine elements conspiring, not only with this very iconic shot facing the cold, unfeeling cathedral of white supremacy and spirituality gone mad, but you have this powerful number of 23, not just the number of Michael Jordan, but representing freedom and power and harmony and the breaking down of barriers, all coalescing to create a wonderful moment in time where history is made. Again, we'll touch more on it when we come back, but definitely a fantastic first half. Can't wait to see where we go from here as we look at the press release and then the aftermath, where people are trying to take this discourse. Some people think that the Ministry of Education has gone too far. We are saying they haven't gone far enough. Again, much to talk about. Much to talk about.
Indeed.
Well, it came right on the brink of a local government election. So, I mean, everything was perfect timing everything was perfect timing. And of course, the larger context, of course, is the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court decision on affirmative action in higher education, repealing affirmative action, basically saying that there is no such thing as racist discrimination and racism is ended and there's no such thing anymore, and race should not be used as a factor in any kind of entry requirements and those kinds of things. And here is this incident just proving the proving the lie of that. I really think that we should
Vic, if
internationalize that image
Vic,
and this
Rudy,
conversation. That image should go international, and the conversation around it should go international. I really think that that image is that powerful that it can be a kind of rallying cry around these issues and could contemporize a lot of these issues and bring all of these kinds of things
yeah,
to bear.
Vic,
And,
if the discourse that takes over excludes race entirely, if the national discourse continues in the direction that is going, where race is more and more marginalized in the conversation, we may find ourselves in a position where it's not remembered in that way. People don't really understand what really took place and why
but the
it took.
beauty of the image is that it's kind of hard not to, I mean, that's the beauty of the image. That's the thing. That's the great thing. Like the great thing about the pyramids,
Yeah, but
right?
Vic, come on,
The
man, I'm
great thing about
talking.
the pyramids is that they're there, so it's like, nobody, like it's like, well, ting. Well, our people used to be and thing, and they say, yeah, well, and that kind of stuff. But then they're there, you know, all the way down to Nubia, they're there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. This is beta. So you're so alpha, beta, fur, and this is beta cruise now, right? Yeah.
All right, let's welcome back our listeners on 91.1 Talk City after the lotto. And I think we're going to go straight to the Africa report now. And when we come back from the Africa report, we're going to continue this discussion. We're going to look at, as Reverend Kamal said, the report, the new hair code, and what people are saying about it, and how we feel about it. We're going to get everybody's opinion on the show here. Dr. Fergus, over to you.
Yes, Renee, bring up that clip for me, please. Percent of the territory that we call Ghana today was united by the Asante Hene, or King of the Asante Union, between 1670 and 1810. The Ashanti and their neighbors to the south and southwest share a common ancestry and common language we call Akan. The Akan diaspora comprise a large percentage of the Africans enslaved in Jamaica, Barbados, Suriname, and Brazil. Many surviving Akan words, folklore, and spirituality attest to this migration. For example, in Jamaica, we have the abeng, meaning horn, made from a conch shell or bull's horn, dukuna, which is a type of peme, obia, and of course Anansi, the spider god of wisdom. 5 years ago, the ruling Asante Hene, Otumfo Osei Tutu II, was in Brazil. A year later, he paid his respects to the Akan diaspora in Jamaica. This year, he will visit Trinidad and Tobago for the Emancipation Festival. Incidentally, the name Osei Tutu was the name of the founding father of the Ashanti Union in the 17th century. In this edition of the Africa Report, we present a brief historical overview of the Asante Hene in relation to the rise and fall of the Ashanti Empire. Asante Hene basically means King of the Ashanti Union, but in terms of the history of Ashanti expansion, it means King of Kings or Emperor. It equates with the title Negusa Negast of Ethiopia, Negus meaning king, and Negusa Negast meaning King of Kings or Emperor. The name Asante Hene comprises two words, Asante and Ohene. Asante comes from Asanteman, meaning the nation or the Asante Union. Ohene is a principal chief or leader of other village chiefs. At the next level is the Omanhene, or the immediate authority over a number of Ohenes. The Oman in Omanhene could be translated kingdom. At the very top of the pyramid is the Asantehene, king over all the kingdoms. These terms are used by all Akan-speaking kingdoms. When an Asantehene transitions, the Asantehema or Queen Mother shortlists a number of candidates and submits the names to the Council of State to select the successor, who generally takes a new name upon installment or coronation. According to historians, sometime around the 1660s, 5 Akan clans migrated to the vicinity of modern-day Kumasi. These clans grew wealthy from the abundance of gold, and because Kumasi was a hub of trade routes linking Hausaland, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Niger Bend, which commanded the trans-Saharan trade routes to the Mediterranean. In order to unite the clans, the priest Okomfo Anoche magically caused a golden stool to descend from the sky and land at the feet of Osei Tutu, which Anoche interpreted to mean that Tutu was the one divinely chosen to lead them, thus making him the first Asantehene, Osei Tutu I. Okomfo Anoche Teaching Hospital in Kumasi is named after this famous priest and royal advisor. The golden stool is not a legend. It is real and remains the symbol of unity of the Ashanti people. Here's what Asantehene Osei Tutu II said in a lecture at the University of Antom de Com in Suriname in 2018.
As the incumbent of the golden stool, I am the embodiment of the soul and unity of the Asante nation.
In order to consolidate his power, Asantehene Osei Tutu I proclaimed a new constitution and restructured the army, or Asafo. Osei Tutu I became a conquering lion, defeating some of the most powerful Akan kingdoms and empires of the southwest, including Denchira, which had previously ruled over them. After 30 years of war, he was killed in battle against the Achem, another powerful Akan kingdom. His grandnephew and successor, Asantehene Opokuwari, continued expanding Ashanti power in the region, defeating Achem and turning north to bring new territory under the political control of Ashanti. In 1807, the Ashanti reached the zenith of their power with the defeat of the Fanti, another Akan-speaking nation. Unfortunately for the future of Ashanti, the British had entrenched themselves on the Fanti coast and refused to accept the authority of the Asantehene. Between 1823 and 1900, the Ashanti and the British fought 5 major wars. The British were defeated by the Ashanti in the first encounter. When the British defeated the Ashanti army in the Third War in 1874, they imposed a ransom of 50,000 ounces of gold on the Asantehene. The invaders were astounded by the wealth and sophistication of the palace of the Asantehene. Inside was a library full of books in many languages, many golden utensils and works of art, elegant tables and stools and oriental silks and more. The soldiers plundered everything, dynamited the palace, and burned down the city of Kumasi. Among the looted items was the stool or throne of the Asantehene, but that stool was not the golden stool of Okomfo Anoche. The British again invaded Asanteman in 1896. This episode ended with the kidnap of Asantehene Ajiman Prempeh I, somewhat similar to the capture of Toussaint Louverture and his family in 1802. Knowing of the destructiveness of the Maxim machine gun, exploding cannon shells, and repeating rifles in the hands of the British soldiers, Prempeh made the fatal mistake and invited the British to negotiate the payment of the ransom. Instead, the British agents seized Prempeh, his mother, his father, his brother, and several other close family members and courtiers, and shipped them off to Sierra Leone after keeping them in Elmina Castle for a year. Before leaving Kumasi, the British again committed sacrilege by destroying the royal mausoleum and blowing up the sacred trees of the Ashanti. From Sierra Leone, the Asantehene and his royal household were exiled in the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean. Elmina Castle was the ultimate humiliation because it was where the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British had forced millions of Africans through the door of no return and into slavery in the Americas. Knowing of its nationalist symbolism, the British desperately wanted the golden stool and might have gotten it if not for the heroism of the Ejisuhene or Queen of Ejisu Kingdom, Ya Esantewa, who led an army of 20,000 troops against them in what has become known as the War of the Golden Stool, the final war which ended in 1901. Asantewa ultimately surrendered to the British, and she too was sent into exile in the Seychelles, where she died in 1921. After the war, Britain's future Prime Minister, David George, told the Parliament, Frederick Hudson's quest for the Golden Stool was like the quest for the Holy Grail. To conclude, the British brought Prempeh back from exile in 1924 and demoted him to the rank of Ohene of Kumasi, or Kumasihene. The British governor, like the British Raj of India, assumed the power of the Asantehene. The Asanteheneship was finally restored to the Ashanti in 1935. Osei Tutu II is the 16th Asantehene since the formation of the Asante Union in the 17th century. He is a highly educated man and is the most richly attired ruler in the world, whether he is in his palace or visiting other countries. Indaba welcomes His Majesty to our shores.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Dr. Fergus, for that brilliant and thought provoking and historical presentation. And of course, the excitement is building around the coming of the Asante Hen. As I said in a previous program, I don't think we've had royalty at this level since the arrival of Haile Selassie back in the 1960s. So, there's something about the people who have emerged from slavery, that the place of black royalty in our imagination is an important one. And so, as I say, the excitement is building. I've been there for those who are now ordering. I've just learned that over the years, through the emancipation festivities, people have come and made their connections with, the business people in the village. And now people order their clothes and have their clothes tailor made before emancipation. And those clothes are then brought in by the entrepreneurs from Ghana and other parts of the continent in time for emancipation. So, there's a scramble now to get the right kind of attire to be in the presence of the king. So it's quite extraordinary how things evolve when you bring African people together in a Pan-African setting like the Emancipation commemoration every year. So we'll see where it goes from here. On that note, I want us to return to the issue that, unless Brother Reverend Kamau, you want to say something before we move back to the here issue?
Very briefly, again, to congratulate Dr. Fergus on a job very well done. Um, uh, Clearly, Dr. Fergus, by way of his own attire on tonight, is certainly clad and clothed for royalty. We look forward to finding out and learning where he got that wardrobe from. We can benefit from the same. But on a serious note, um, there's a feedback, an echo. I don't know why that is.
That's
I'm not
coming
sure
from
it's
the
because of
studio.
proximity.
But
Yeah.
let me see if we could, since Karen is here, if we can give an opportunity to our listeners on 94.1 to use the call-in facility 622-4911 if they want to be part of the conversation for the next 15 minutes. And we're going to give priority to those callers if we can get the technical stuff right. 622-491-1111.
We actually
That's the
have
number,
a call right about now. Let me just bring them in. Hello, caller.
Yes, greetings.
Caller, are you there?
Yes, yes.
No, I'm not sure why that is
Alaikum,
Hello.
happening.
alaikum.
but
We
we
can
can
We
hear
can
hear
you,
hear
him.
you.
caller Karen.
Oh, you can hear him. Okay.
Yes, this is Balagunya.
Good night, brother Balagoon.
Yes. You see
Is he hearing
British,
you?
that British attirement onto Africa, it exists in the church up to today. That control of the British exists in the church with those students from Trinity College. Up to today, that exists in this country. The force of the Church of England is upon our shores still, acting strong and positive. And unless Africans don't get up and see themselves, we have to stand up again. Africa and the diaspora, we have to stand up and take a direction. Thank you.
All right, thank you, brother Balagoon. And I think, brother Balagoon, uh, draws our attention to the role of the church in the background of that photo. And I can't help but think, based on the commentary that I saw on social media, that was a factor in the conversation. But that's something to think about. But let's now turn our attention to the code, the hair code itself, and just a quick sense of how many people think that it is adequate, and who think that and how you feel about it. Just comments from everyone, starting with you, Reverend Kamal.
Again, thank you for the floor. I was about to say that, and very, very briefly,
Shabaka, in the interest of the audience, could you just itemize the 5 or 6 areas of the code very
I was
briefly?
about to do so actually. So, with regards to same, I have it right
Okay,
here.
okay, great. Yeah,
Beautiful. So we are on the same
yeah.
wavelength and frequency. So the points of the national code are as follows. One, students shall maintain neat and clean hair at all times. Clean is very, very, as it were, objective, but that word neat is has been used historically in ways that are very, very subjective. Two, hair that crosses shoulder length should be tied back at all times for safety reasons. Number three, locks, twists, plaits, afros, cornrows shall be allowed for all students in compliance with individual school hair rules. Number four, female students shall be allowed to wear hair extensions, including weaves and braids, in compliance with individual school hair rules. Number five, wigs and dyed or colored hair for students are not allowed. In exceptional cases, as determined by the school principal, approval may be granted to students. Number six, hairstyles that obstruct the normal view of others are not allowed, except for religious reasons. Number seven, eyebrow markings and eyelash extensions are not allowed. Number eight, haircut parting designs should be simple. Intricate designs are not allowed. And number nine, hair ornaments should be in compliance with individual school hair rules. There is some wiggle room with regards to schools being given a certain amount of creativity to form their own hair codes, but they must be in compliance and alignment with the national hair codes. Already there's some pushback from the Mahasaba by way, of course, of its current leadership. They are speaking to it being an open door, so to speak. I want to quote verbatim here. Are we going to go and allow nose rings, studying the tongue, boys wearing earrings, etc. Because this is where it's leading to, I'm quoting the Guardian newspaper, you're going to completely remove the barrier and we are going to become Americanized in our education. And then are we going to talk about there's no longer need for a uniform? So we don't know which child attends which schools, he asked. So that's part of the pushback that we are seeing. And because schools have some creativity in terms of how they develop their own codes, it'll be very interesting to see what happens come September. They have until October to finalize these codes and send them to the Ministry of Education. So I'm asking that we be very, very vigilant to see what these schools come up with in terms of their codes, which again must align with the national codes. And I'll land there and give up the floor for now.
Reverend, I just want to say that the Mahasabha statement is by far the most backward statement from a political figure that I've seen on this issue, and it really has nothing to do with what is actually taking place, but sort of reflects the, I don't know, the imaginative space of that group. But Robert Arubadiri, let me bring you in second here before we go to Dr. Fergus. In terms of the hair code, how do you feel about it?
I mean, we have to take the victories and celebrate the victories when they come, and this
And wait, before you continue, Rubadiri, sorry to interrupt you. We have a call, and we do want to prioritize our callers.
Sure, no problem.
Let's just they hung up. Sorry about that.
Okay, but we are prioritizing those calls. So Karen, you just send them through 622-4911. That's the number to call to be part of the show.
Okay.
You were saying, Victor, that we have to celebrate our victories.
Yeah, we have to celebrate the victories when they come, and that the language of that. Who would have ever thought that we would ever see language like that from a ministry as regards stuff? So the only one is probably like no intricate parting and that kind of stuff. I remember on the day of after the controversy, I simply posted a picture of African hairstyles from the continent.
Okay, hold on a second. I mean, we have a caller. Vic, let's take the caller.
Yes.
Yes, me Balagun again. Me Bala again.
Yes, Bala.
That is the children's fundamental right, you know. That is not a constitutional right. That is the child's fundamental right to have his hair. What you put in a rule to his hair, to his fundamental right, you set in a rule to his right.
What that's a nuance in that question, Bala. But thanks for your call. We'll discuss it on air. We'll discuss it.
So I mean, the tricky part, of course, is the individual school codes, right? But what it does do is it layers a big federal kind of overlay on those individual school codes and that kind of stuff that can regulate them and that can be leveraged in individual cases now that it exists. So again, as I said, it was a perfect storm. The 23, the image, the local government elections where incumbents are under pressure and they feel that they had to like they had to try and get a win, a popular win. And so it bred that thing. So I mean, I say, like, let's take it as a victory. I say that image and the debates and conversations around it needs to be internationalized. I feel that this could go all the way up into the American affirmative, repeal of affirmative action debate. That is how powerful that image is. It allows a conversation, difficult conversations, to coalesce around something that is, that is unspoken, but everywhere. And so that, I think that we need to seize the day and not just rest on our laurels, having one what was won, but we need to push further, and go further. You all hear me?
You are muted, Shabaka. Yes, we are hearing
Yeah,
you.
I
Only
was just
two
saying,
people.
Dr. Fergus Rubadiri has said that he said that we need to celebrate our victories, and certainly you and I have been working on this for some time now. We were there with Kalika Morton back in 2019, and of course, so certainly it on one level it certainly does feel like a victory. It is unprecedented in our history since independence. So it's a history making victory. Wouldn't you agree? I think Dr. Fergus might not be hearing us, perhaps.
I think it might be a delay.
Speaking to me, Shabaka?
Yes, Dr. Fergus. I just wanted your comment now on
Yeah,
this
I
question of
didn't
the.
hear
Yeah, the question is
okay,
Rubeneri,
okay. I
with
think
all the.
Rubadiri needs to know that there is exuberant sort of feeling that he has now, and the the prospects of taking the decision, to where he said. But I think we need to also celebrate little Anguilla. Anguilla set a precedent for us, right? And I would not be surprised if our goodly minister may have copied some of the items from that particular hair code, which was issued, I think, about 2 years ago by a young female minister of education as well,
Right.
Mrs. Kentish Rogers. As soon as she came into office, she herself being a Rastafarian, wears her hair in locks, and she
Rastafari.
overturned the existing you can hear addressing locks, curls, the length of the hair, and all of that. So we did have a model in the Caribbean. This is a Caribbean model. We don't have to look outside. This is a Caribbean model. It's a Caribbean Minister of Education, because when we look at the Education Acts, there are two places where these prejudices are entrenched. One is in the Education Act, and where it is not in the Act, it is in the cabinet anointed, I would say, school codes, because these codes are integrated into education acts. The acts actually refer to the school codes. So the two things they complement each other. Sometimes it's written into the act, but sometimes the act refers to the school codes. So we need, I collected all of the education acts I could collect all there, the exact type of discrimination with respect to, um, decency, the terms that they are quoted under, decency, neatness, discipline, and so on. So we need to understand that. And we need to, big up, as the youth would say, Minister Kentish. She had set a tone for us. She had set the precedent. Unfortunately, she left office shortly afterwards. But we have that example. And I would think, or I would want to think, that Minister Dolly would have seen that code and would have modeled the Trinidad and Tobago code on that. I hope we take our examples from the Caribbean wherever we have them.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Shabaka. I had started off saying the role of the church in all of this. We need to understand that this thing started with the church. It started with the church, and as I said, I would just end with the point by reiterating that the photo in front of the church makes a historical statement in a way that nothing else could.
Very, very, very interesting, Dr. Fergus. Let me just say that in the same way, I want to add my
I
two
tend to lose
cents
you
here.
sometimes on this system. Mine is a bit slower.
Yes. let me just say that I want to say that in the same way
Yes,
that
go
we
ahead.
would celebrate the education minister of Anguilla, Miss Kentish Brown, I think her name was. I think we have to celebrate Dr.
Rajat,
Nyam
Rajat.
Dolly as well. I think I think that's really really important
Yes.
because we didn't have to get a progressive hair code like that. Usually in these kinds of settings, things happen very gradually, and as a consequence, people continue to suffer for a long, long time. There is the potential in the hair code as it now stands to really be transformative. Of course, Dr. Burgos, you and I know that the epistemic environment that we exist in is still one steeped in colonial values. And so, if there is not some form of re education of the administrators, then we're going to find that there are going to be those that try to find loopholes, and perhaps children will still find themselves hurt in the process. But certainly, as it stands right now, we in Trinidad and Tobago are making history across the Caribbean, and it looks like we could become a place that a center for other countries to look to when it comes to this issue. The only thing I have a problem with, and I'll say this, is that at this point in the discourse, is that not enough is being said about race. There's not a clear understanding or acknowledgement that we are a society that has a notion of good hair and bad hair, which is grounded in white supremacy. And at the end of the day, that those words really allude to the fact that African hair and African hairstyles are not professional in and of themselves. They're unkempt. They need to be tamed. They need to be, burnt, whatever it is, to move them in the direction of what is appropriate. And of course, those are the Western beauty ideals. And so, without that in the conversation, perhaps we as a society do not grow enough as much as we can from this issue, from the discourse that's taking place right now. So I think I think that's what disturbs me about the conversation as it is. But I think we need to celebrate the victory according to Victor Rubidiri, and we will find that if something really negative doesn't happen, we will find ourselves as a leading light in the region, because this is a regional issue. This is certainly an issue all across the English speaking Caribbean right now as it stands.
I concur. I concur indubitably, but there's a bit of irony, and I know that usually the church in matters like these tend to be the villain, the antagonist. But I'm looking at a quote here, and I think it's absolutely fit for public consumption. It's coming out again out of this Guardian newspaper, and the quote, I'm quoting the chief executive officer of the Catholic Education Board of Management, Sharon Mangru, was more agreeable than that, of course, of the Mahasaba position, just for contrast sake. Though she noted that there ought to be some tweaks to the languaging in terms of the language use by the minister. Generally, and I'm quoting here, there's agreement that such a policy is needed. Catholic Education Board management. I think, I continue to quote, the Catholic Board recommended some clarifications, definitions of terms, and so on. And generally, that we welcome the inclusion of students in decision making, she said. She further acknowledged that the rules are rooted in a colonial past, and made calls for philosophy to be taught in secondary schools. A study of philosophy will help us to understand how to think and why we think the way we think. And I think a lot of thinking going on there that is important to understand the impact of the colonial legacy, what this has done to us, what this colonial legacy has on us, she shared. And of course, when they went on to the Trinity Board of Governors chairman, Dr. Shelley Ann Tenier, she was oblivious to the proposals and she couldn't respond to the Guardian at the time. She certainly had to investigate before she could, give any opinion. But coming from the chief executive officer of the Catholic Education Board, I am not sure if her spirit and sentiments are divergent to that of her board, but she definitely comes out swinging in support of this.
Yeah, I mean,
And
she's
despite
saying
the
what
fact
we are
that,
saying, and that's really very interesting. And I think that the Catholic schools for some time now have been, you know, stepping back from the whole colonial rules in how they apply the rules in their own schools. There's some evidence to suggest. But I want to take this opportunity to celebrate QRC because months before this issue flared up, QRC began a process of engaging their student body, the administrators at QRC, around this issue, letting students participate in a discourse in terms of how the school would go forward around the hair issue. So, in all of this, let's take a minute to celebrate the teachers and principal of Queen's Royal College
here,
for being
here.
a leading light on this matter. Yes, so Rubadiri, we haven't heard from you. I think yes, you've mentioned that that thing, uh, Reverend Kamau. In your experience, before we close, we go to close here. We have about 3 more minutes for Indaba over time. But where do you think we're going to go? What is your prediction? Do you Let's talk about predictions now. How do you see this going down?
Dr. Fergus is the only one wearing a hat, but if I were to put on the prophetic hat tonight, if I were to put on the hat of the seer, I would predict that there would be some division. While there are indeed progressive schools and progressive mindsets within 21st century Trinidad and Tobago, there are some who are very steeped in the traditional and the colonial past and legacy. They wear it and they see it as a badge of honor, and they see it as something to be celebrated. And so, for many in the society, I'm not sure if it's the majority or the minority at this time, maintaining those old epistemic traditional values and vision for them is very very important, and I believe while it may on the one hand be really well timed in terms of local government election, in terms of appeasing and supporting the values of one set of the community, I think we are very far as a society from the collective consciousness that we need to arrive at in terms of where we get our values from, and how values shape policies and how they shape practices and how they can lead to stigma and discrimination. And I want to certainly join the voice of this very progressive chief executive officer of the Catholic Education Board when she's calling for a greater study of philosophy within secondary schools. I would want to add that we add to that a greater study of world history as well. Because if we study philosophy within a vacuum and we don't include world history, we don't include African history pre-slavery, because that's usually where Africans enter right stage Atlantic Ocean coming in as slaves. And if we don't factor into that geopolitics, then it could be again something that eliminates the racial discussion. And I make the point in closing that until we reach to the point where we are a post reparation society, we cannot be a post, as it were, racial society. We have to reparate, we have to repair, we have
Before we
to
go
give.
post I got you, brother Reverend.
Absolutely. We absolutely have to do that.
Yeah, thank you, brother Reverend. Thanks for those comments. Rubadiri, your closing remarks.
Yeah, Gary, I want to agree with Rev in terms of on that call for philosophy, adding world history. I will add ethics and civics inside of that. My thing, as I said, internationalize that picture and the debates and all the things around it. And the other part of which I had spoken about before, which is the destiny of those black boys. That is what I think the planet has to deal with and what the tribe has to deal with right now. Right? We're dealing right now with the criminalizing of entire generations and communities of black boys in for real. It is really happening. And serious genocidal energies are afoot, and it's claiming larger and larger swaths, not just in the working class, but now spreading to the middle class and other classes and those kinds of things. The footprint and it is because there's been cultural engineering has been done and the weaponizing of one of our most revolutionary assets, our
Yeah.
music and our art and our imaging and
Yeah,
that kind
we're
of
gonna
stuff.
we're gonna have to. That is a very important conversation we have to come back to, brother. I think that is a conversation for another Indaba. I think we've lost Dr. Fergus, and so in closing tonight, I would have wished we were still on air.
I'll keep back.
Dr. Fergus, your closing remarks.
I I'm here. I'm here. Yeah, just the last word. Thank you. I was backstage. I was put backstage. Yeah, well, I just want to say that every revolution, there's a counter revolution. For every progress, there's a pushback. But so what I hope the Minister of Education would do this this code, not to amend it in terms of watering it down. If she's amended it, it's to strengthen it, keep a foot down, and look forward where we are going. We expect pushback from certain quarters. There would be no pushback in. There had been no pushback in Anguilla. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think that because Dr. Fergus is lagging out there, I would say there's nothing stronger than an idea whose time has come. I will remind our listeners that the great Frantz Fanon once said that imperialism leaves behind germs of rot, which we must clinically detect and remove not just from our lands but our minds as well. And of course, the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey said we have to remove the kinks from our brains and not from our hair. And I think we're going to close on that note. As I said, I would have liked us to still be on air because I want to invite those people as an activist, those people, women in particular, who find themselves forced to process their hair to go to work. Those women, I want them to come and report to us what they're experiencing so that we could begin to look more closely at that issue because I'm aware that is a real problem in the country still today. On that note, brothers and sisters, I want to thank everyone who was part of the program here tonight. Our special guest, Brother Ruby Derry Victor, and all his dogs. And my co-host, Reverend Kwame Kamau and Dr. Claudius Fergus. And wish you join us again next week, Wednesday. Another edition of Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, the place to find consensus, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. Good night.